All right, so when you open AutoCAD, you'll see that the main toolbar is at the top here. And just kind of like most programs, you have the tabs. So the home one has kind of the most common ones. But you got insert, annotate, parametric view, manage. Again, almost 99% of the time you'll be on this kind of home tab. And I'm sure like Rhino, you can, after like the first hour of using AutoCAD, you kind of stop using the actual icons and start typing things in because it's a lot faster. It's almost not all the kind of commands are the same, but if you've used Rhino, type something in, line makes a line, just type L and line should come up. The commands are almost, well, other than a few, are pretty similar. So just going over kind of a couple quickly. Your draw is right here. So this is, everything from line, which you'll use 90% of the time, circle, arc, rectangle, and such. And clicking on it, you'll then get your arrow, your cursor, and click once, and click again, enter, and you have a line. Obviously, that is pretty straightforward. This next one here is modify. So these commands after the line command are your most used ones, and we'll go over one by one, but I'll just go through the rest of these quickly. Sure.
How do you change your settings so that instead of just icon view, you have top view as well?
Sorry, you have...
Instead of just like icon view?
Oh, so you don't have this top bar? No. You want a Mac? I know. Let's just see. Yeah, that would be it. I know on the Windows, if you type ribbon, it's going to either, sorry, is that one? Just typing ribbon work. No? Yeah, so for the most part, I won't be doing much stuff up here. I'll start. Part of the nice thing about AutoCAD is you can do things once you get the hang of it, you can do things really fast. So I would suggest forgetting about the toolbar almost at all. I mean, I'll point out the commands through the toolbar, but the typing and the shortcuts are far superior to actually going through all the menus. And there's really not that many you have to remember. Again, if you're creating a typical building, it's really lines, and you're doing some simple commands to those lines to get kind of your final thing. So I'll also do the shortcut when I go over each of these things, so you'll be able to find and follow along. But really, other than these two here, I mean, there's obviously tons more options, but to keep it simple and without getting, I don't think I've ever used anything under the parametric tab or the view tab or any of these at all. So I have no idea what these do actually. So shouldn't worry about those ones. So just to go, we got draw, modify, annotate, which is your text and your dimensions for the most part. Layers, so you can manage layers here, but I usually just always have this layer tool up, and that's just brought up by typing layer. And here you can see all your layers and then control them as well. Blocks, which we probably won't get over today, but you can create a door, like just a simple door, and then save that as a block, and then every time you want to use a door, you can just import that and then scale it to the right size, copy it, and it's easy to use. Properties. So if we had a line here, obviously each kind of line has its properties, and this would be the color of the line, the thickness of the line, and if it's dashed or not. But I would suggest never changing this ever. Don't. So the way it works is you can draw a line and you can select that line individually and change its properties. But as you see here, all those properties now are by layer. So right now this line is on layer 0, but if I wanted to move that line to a different layer, let's say it's a floor line, I'm going to change the layer of it to floor, and it now has the properties of the floor layer. So while you could start changing lines individually, if you ever wanted to mass change the thickness of all your floor lines, and you've started changing these to other things, you're going to not be able to just do that simply. You would have to select them all and do it individually instead of just changing your layer here. So your floor layer over here, and here I can change them all at the same time, as long as they've all kept this bi-layer thing. So don't ever change these. And then these other ones, groups, utilities. So here is distance. If you're measuring stuff, that's really it. Clipboard and view, which copy and paste is pretty self-explanatory. All right. So part of that template that you got was this whole list of layers, and I'll just quickly, or I'll go kind of through them. So again, I've kind of divided kind of all like your drawing line types. Going through a project, I'll probably add some. So if I want maybe, well, I have wall above and wall below. So those are similar, but you can see that I've turned them to dash lines. So just indicating on my drawing that there's a wall above or a wall below. But I might have a couple type of furniture, so I might add an A furniture too. And just, I mean, they don't have to be called that exact thing, but I've kept it nicely. So it kind of puts them in alphabetical order. And then if you have, well, eventually down the line, you have like structural columns or HVAC, you would go, S column, just to keep all your kind of parts separate. But in here, you have your layer type. You have if it's on or off. So if this layer right here, so to change a layer of an item, I would just select it, and then in this one here, change its actual layer. So this right now is a dimension line. Let's pretend. If I turn it, the flashlight or the light bulb, that just turns it on or off. Freeze is the sun, so it's either sun or frozen. And the difference between on and off and freeze and frozen or unfrozen is if I had it off and selected everything in my drawing and moved it, the thing that was off would still move. So it's still there. It's still, you can't really, you can kind of select it, but it will still move with the rest of your drawing if you kind of moved everything. Frozen is, that thing is not moving whatsoever. So, if you just want to not see something, I would usually use on and off. If something is kind of like an old drawing that or an old part of the drawing I don't really want to see or I don't want to get rid of yet, but it's not really useful to me, I'll then freeze it. So there's a slight difference, but we have lock. So if something's placed in, something is set in place, you can lock it, and you see when it's locked, it's slightly, it just goes a little transparent, just showing that it's locked. Your color. So you'll see that I've everything is a different color, and we'll get to this later, but you see if I double click color, I've used just these basic colors here, and those colors actually align with the plot style, the printing. So white is the thickest and red is the lightest. So anything in my drawing between there, when it prints out or when I turn it to a PDF, will automatically get its line thickness from the color it is. So that makes it super easy to kind of do your thing in AutoCAD, and without even having to worry about line weights, you know that when I print it out, all my walls, which are white, are going to be the thickest. All my doors are going to be the lightest. And as long as you've kind of kept your layers something that makes sense, there's absolutely zero work. Taking this to PDF and then putting it into Illustrator, all your line weights are done. And these aren't just random; these are kind of industry standards. So, if you've ever seen like a construction set of drawings, there's a distinct hierarchy of walls to kind of the other lines that are on the drawing. Does that color thing kind of make sense?
Would you recommend using this over
I know. Well, like in my year, everyone who started using AutoCAD before coming here, I think still uses AutoCAD. And people that just kind of learned Rhino first, I think use Rhino. But that line weight, like the line weight and the printing issue, I think is the biggest problem for people who don't use AutoCAD. Because you can kind of, go through Rhino. Actually, I've never done it, but you can get your line weights and stuff through Rhino. But if you have a template like this set up, it's just, extremely easy to have a nice looking plan without almost doing any work. So, I had this brought up. This is just a project from last year. Obviously, the colors look kind of weird on the screen. But once you print this out, you'll see that, I'll show you how to do this in a second, but see all the the line weights, the dash lines, that was all just done kind of automatically. I didn't have to go through and change all my lines one by one, or worry about I don't know what. And no matter what file I'm using, because I'm using the same kind of template, they're all going to look the same. So I don't know. That's kind of the benefit of AutoCAD for me compared to Rhino. Yes, but what I usually do, my workflow is usually like I might do some AutoCAD floor plans or like SketchUp quick massing, and both of those you can bring AutoCAD into SketchUp, you can bring AutoCAD into Rhino, you can bring SketchUp into Rhino. So I kind of do my plans and massing in AutoCAD and SketchUp, and then in Rhino I kind of bring everything together. And then again, you can, if you do like a slice or like take, if you kind of pull out a more final 3D model, and take a section cut of that in Rhino, I still bring those lines back into AutoCAD and then clean them up and use that to make my actual plans. So I think I didn't draw these from scratch. I had my 3D model, but obviously the lines, it's more just the outline, and then from there I kind of tweaked. I brought those kind of curves into AutoCAD and then made a nice set of plans.
So you can bring the section cut from Rhino into
Yes.
AutoCAD and
Yeah.
then assign like the lines.
Yeah, so they all come in like the same color. They all came in on like the layer 0, but then from there I put them all in the right layers. I obviously fix thicknesses and stuff because my 3D model is usually not perfect. So, and I probably fudged some things. So here's where I, do kind of the rest, and also like adding the right kind of symbols for door swings, lines above, dimensions, windows. So that kind of stuff. When I export it out of Rhino, is pretty messy, but I kind of do make it nice and clean in AutoCAD. So I use all three, or there's probably some other programs in there too that just, because I've used them all before, I just kind of pick which one's best for. And thankfully Rhino kind of takes and accepts almost anything. So that kind of is everything will go back into Rhino eventually, but, well, not these final plans, but, so that's kind of how I do my sort of thing. Right. So other than the color, there's also the line type. So if you click on that, you'll bring up a bunch of different types of lines. If the one you're looking for is not here, I think if you weren't using this template, some of those wouldn't be there. But you can just go load, and it's got a million type of lines in here. It actually has, where is that one? It has the insulation one, so you even can make things look like the insulation line, right, on the inside of a wall. So that would look like that, right? But I don't want my dimensions to look like insulation, so I'm going to turn that back. And then also here's line weight, so you could manually control your line weight here. But again, I've done that all in my printing settings, which I'll show you how to install and how that works. But I know some firms might manually do this here, but as far as I can tell, most will use kind of a plot thing. And they've probably paid someone a lot of money to set up all their AutoCAD templates, all their printing, all that kind of stuff. So
Do you have a layer for insulation?
I do not, but if I started doing that, I probably would make one, and then all the installation I kind of drew would be on that layer. And so, when you start doing details, you'll have different hatches. So like just one with dots or the concrete one, that kind of stuff. So again, I would do that kind of layer by layer as well. So I am, yes. Right. So that's kind of the layers. You'll see up here, or the check mark shows what layer I'm currently drawing on. So the easy thing to change is you just double click or go up here, and you can change the layer you're drawing on. Okay. So down here at the bottom, which may also be slightly different than on Mac, or does it look somewhat similar? This. Okay, good. So these are all kind of your not drawing options or modifiers, but kind of how AutoCAD's working options. So you got your grid. I usually turn my grid on and off. Oh, one thing. I have my background as black. That's not the default. I think yours is kind of grayish. Does it look kind of gray, or is it black? You can make that any color you want. I prefer black just because all my lines are not black. So it kind of gives a nice contrast. But if you type in options, or option, you'll come up with all these kind of options. which again I've never really played with because they don't really matter. But the most important one here, you'll see on display, you'll have your color scheme. So this, I think, changes the actual color of all my toolbars, but I like dark, so let's leave it there. And if you go onto colors, you'll see your 2D model space. So that's what I'm looking at right now. And the background here, and the color is just right here. So I can make that red if I wanted to, which is probably a bad idea. And I think the default is some grayish or dark gray, but I prefer black. Alright, so going back down here, you got your grid, you have your snap mode. So you can make it snap to the grid if you want. So if I had this on, I would only be able to draw like at certain points. So I couldn't get, you know, if something's pretty, I never really used that ever, but let's see. And all these, if you right click on them, more options will come up. So you can turn it on or off by just left clicking, but a right click will bring up the actual options. And if I went to snap settings, you see it's snapping at every 100 millimeters. So I can only draw at like 100, 200, 300. That's where my mouse is gonna snap to. Again, a lot of these I don't really use, but I think this is on by default, dynamic input. You'll see if I bring that up, if I turn it on and go to draw a line, so I'm just pressing L, right, and from here, you'll see that all those options are up on my mouse, so like it's showing the length and I guess the angle between this other line. While that seems helpful, I actually never use it because it seems to slow my computer down no matter what computer I'm using. It always just makes it lag slightly. So I just kind of turn that off, but I guess it's up to you. So that one is dynamic input. Then you have ortho. So if you turn ortho on, you'll see that I can only draw up or like on the 90 degrees. So I mean, if you wanted a building with absolutely no angles on it, keep ortho on and you won't be able to do anything else. Well, you can change. So, like right now, it shows. So, if I press line like that, right, and I'm drawing a line, it's showing me right now that my line is obviously 16,282. If I just wanted like a 5-meter line, so 5,000, if you just start typing that in, it shows that you're typing it in, and then you see I've drawn a line here that's 5,000 long. But even without that on, where is it? Here. And I click. See, it doesn't have that same information up there, but if I type 5,000, whoop, press 500, but 5,000, it does the same thing. It's just adding more information on the actual screen, but it's not giving you any more kind of functionality at all. So it's just kind of option if you want it on or off, really. To change the length of a line later, you can either click on the the grips, or I don't know, if I wanted that line to be 4,000, I might just delete it and draw a 4,000 line. So right beside ortho is polar. So what this does, if you turn that on and you right click, you'll see that it comes up with a bunch of different kind of angle options. So right now it's on 90, 180, 270, 360. So what that's going to show, it's not going to restrict your cursor to that, but you'll see if I click on here and I go close to those ones, that green extension line comes up and it kind of snaps to that angle. So that's what I usually draw on, right? So obviously, if you turn it off, turn both of those off, you'll see that there's no, it doesn't snap to those kind of angles. Well, it does actually slightly, but That's weird. All right, sorry. It's snapping to this vertical just because I've drawn this line here, but the other ones it doesn't snap to. So I would usually keep polar on, or else your building will be slightly, like it's almost impossible. It is physically impossible to draw a line perpendicular to that without. Yep. Or I guess shift. Shift will keep it to ortho. So, but I usually have polar on, and then also if you wanted to change that, to anything, so you could add the 45s in there. So now on the 45s, it has that little snap as well. So I usually keep that at 90 unless I know I want to draw a 45-degree line, and then I'll just turn that on, and then probably turn it off after. I never use that one. So show snapping reference lines is just going to be that. I don't know what that one does actually. Just keep that on. Snap cursor to 2D reference points. So this one, if you right click, you'll see that it's got endpoints, midpoints, and some of these I might have changed from default, but usually endpoints obviously on. If I turn these all off and then start to draw a line, you'll see before I was getting that snap to the end of the line, and now I'm not. So again, no matter how far I zoom, I've dealt with people like this before, but no matter how far you zoom in, there's no physical way to get your next line to start on the end of that unless you're trying to snap. So if you ever see a drawing that has this on every single corner, fire them. But so what did I do there? So usually endpoint, I think endpoint, center, intersection, I don't know which ones are on by default, but you can kind of play with those. So if I wanted to draw something right in the middle of this line, I can easily just go midpoint, turn that on. Now when I start to draw a line, you'll see it's at the ends, but it's also in the middle. And right, no matter what, every line now has like a middle snap point on it, and that's directly right in the middle. Turning it all on might seem like a good idea at first, but if you start getting a busy drawing, it'll just be snapping everywhere, and you won't know which one is the right one. Yeah, so I usually, yeah, that looks about right. So the other ones in here, let's see, you can turn, if you've actually put line weights into your drawing, which I don't do, you can turn it on or off here. You can turn your transparencies on or off. And a bunch of these other ones are dealing with 3D. I did 3D in AutoCAD once, but I would not suggest it. Do that in Rhino. Those are 3D. And then over these ones here are your scale and your annotative objects. So you're always going to draw in real scale. So never do calculations in your head and draw your building not to scale. Draw your building in scale, and then AutoCAD knows if you're printing something at 1 to 100, it's going to be 100 the size. So don't try to, I don't know, be smart and draw something just half size. Always 1 to 1, and then let AutoCAD deal with scaling. Because then no matter if you're putting it on an 11 by 17 or an A1, you just change the scale, and your dimensions are all going to change. Your text can all change to fit that right size. So that's part of the nice thing about AutoCAD is it's for plans, so it does a lot of things pretty well. This is the unit. So obviously we did. So it never actually says metric within AutoCAD. That's part of the confusing part. But this is set up to be a metric, and we're on decimal. Architectural is feet and inches. So if you had opened up that template and I drew a line, you'd see it would be like 6/32 of an inch or like 1 foot. So you would do all your dimensions that way.
Do you know how to explain the bar? Because I have like half of it.
Yeah, see, a lot of these are new with 2015
It is when
on a yeah.
no, on
Oh, on Windows?
the dash, like the very last.
Yeah, so yeah. If you don't see them, this last one, I'm pretty sure mine were all on by default, but this very last, yeah.
Oh, right.
hmm and then these other ones, this is, yeah, those ones don't really matter. So really, the most important ones down here are this box here. And you used to be able to turn these all into words instead of icons in 2014, and they took that away, which made me mad. Because the words made a lot more sense than all these little icons. But yeah, so really, the grid, polar, and this kind of box here, which changes your snaps. All right. So let's just draw, just to go over some of the kind of most helpful kind of modifiers. Let's just draw a outline of a house or a box, or however complicated you want it to be. So let's just say, so I just typed line, clicked one point, and I'm just going to go 10,000, so like 10 meters. Let's go 6. And as long as you haven't turned all these things off, you should see that. So AutoCAD has something called, I think it's tracking. I think that's what they call it. But if I wanted to end something right in line with this, I could obviously I knew I just typed in 10 meters. So I could just type in 10 meters like this. But if you go down here and hover over it until the green box comes up, and then you can just drag it up, and you'll see that it now has those kind of construction lines, both up and on the 90 degree. So it's easy. Click there, it's going to snap to that. You know, maybe if I wanted it, let's go 2000. And again, if I wanted to end it right at the end, I could just hover over. All right. And I didn't check, but thankfully this is all in the wall layer. I mean, if it wasn't, I could just select it all. And similar to Rhino, it has the the left select, which selects the things I just can touch, and then this one selects the things that I only fully encompass in my selection. I could just select it all and then change the thing here. So most of these modify commands are basically the same, almost have the exact same as in Rhino, but I'm just going to go offset to create my kind of inside of the wall. So if I type off, but offset should pop up. And then it's going to specify a distance. So let's say these are 200 millimeter walls. And then I can just click. It's going to ask me like what side I want it on. I'm just going to do this fast. And then to finish, I just click enter. What I could have done is selected them all and joined them and then offset them all at once. But you'll find if you ever start joining things, you're probably like 10 seconds down the line, you'll probably have to explode it. So I usually just keep lines separate. But from there, I just use my fillet, just F-I-L, or just type out the whole word. And you'll see the options that come up, radius. The important ones are radius and multiply, or multiple, sorry. I think radius, for some reason, always is on a default of some little number. So I would check that. So what that's just doing is, if you want a rounded edge, it will round the corners. But the problem is, if you round the edge, if it was like 0.005, it would round the edge almost that you, I mean, so small that you can't see it, but it would leave a line, a little curve, and then another line. So you have all these little like dots of half circles everywhere. Because if you forget about them, you know, and you want just to delete this line, you can delete all your lines, but there's still this little like, unless I've actually selected it, this little curve there. So let me just go back into fillet, and also multiple. If I don't click that, I'm going to fillet those two, and it's going to stop the command, and I'd have to redo it. But if you press multiple, then it's just the command's going to stay up, and it's just I'm just going to keep on doing it until I'm done, and press enter. So rotate here. So obviously rotate's pretty self-explanatory, but once you know, if you did this, select your object, click rotate, it's going to ask you for your base point. So it's giving me my base point here. And obviously, you know, if I wanted it 90 degrees, it's automatically going to snap at 90 degrees. But to get a lot more control on that, I'm going to click reference down here. So a lot of commands have, or both scale and rotate have this reference. And you'll see, especially on scale, it works. It's very helpful. But here's the same idea. If I click reference, it's now going to ask for the reference angle. So instead of kind of like my mouse not lining up with any of these things, I'm going to click my base point again, and then this point along it. And now you see that my mouse kind of is lined up with that edge. So if I wanted to rotate this, what's an example for rotate? If I wanted it to meet, I don't know what the example is, but just remember that's going to be helpful someday. Because if you see again, if I wanted my mouse to snap, if I wanted it to snap to something, my mouse is actually aligned with it, and then when I snap it, it's going to follow it. See, if I don't do the reference, my mouse, well, here it's like that, but here, right? So now, see that now I have some weird angle between my mouse and my. There's an example. To get this back to 90 degrees, rotate, which select the base point, select reference, have the line I want on the 90 degree, and just like that, there. So trim is, again, just like Rhino. You know, I would have a trim line, and then two the things I want to trim. So I would just kind of select them all, select trim, and then right, just like that. If I wanted just to make those the end of the walls now, I could just trim again, and I put in TR as trim. There. See, copy, obviously pretty self-explanatory. I don't think. Or again, copy has the, if I select it, I select my base point. I don't know. So copy doesn't have any funny options like that, but let's see. Mirror. It's going to select what I want, and then select kind of the mirror plane, and it's going to ask me if I want to erase the source object or not. So there, if I click yes, it's going to get rid of the original, but if I click no, it will keep that one up. So stretch, I don't believe they have. Stretch is probably the command I use the most that I don't think Rhino has. So if I wanted to, say, move this wall down, 3 meters. So I want to keep the same shape, but it's just going to be move three down. You know, I could either take this, move. So I'm just clicking M 3,000, and then fillet this. So that didn't take too long, but you can just go, so select, you're going to have to use the green selection, so the one that selects kind of anything it touches. So if I select it like that, and then go stretch, I can just basically click anywhere, because I just know I want to move it 3,000 down, and then like that. So what it's doing is just basically taking what I selected and kind of just either stretching or kind of compressing that. So again, if I want to do this, it would be like stretch there. So moving whole walls and kind of whole parts, you can move it, if your whole building just needed to shrink, get a foot thinner, instead of having to, and if it was, extremely complex, I could, you can just select half. Obviously this won't make that much sense, but stretch, right? And I'm just kind of taking everything I selected and stretching it out. Yeah, yes. You'll see, I'll go over dimensions briefly, but the dimensions are actually, they're tied to like 2 points, so your start and your end. And then if you change that distance in between, like stretch or scale, the dimensions will change automatically. Right, and then array. So array does kind of what you would expect to do. I take my object. So the default one is rectangular array, but there's also polar and path. But then click enter, and it's made an array of my objects. And then down here is all the kind of my options. So once it kind of does it first, and then you can change your rows. Oops. Right. And then let me delete that because I don't want that. All right, for scale, obviously it kind of does what you expect it to do, but if I selected just this whole object and then click kind of my base point, the point that it's scaling from, you'll see that it's almost, you're unable to really control it with your mouse. Like, I don't even know what it's doing right now. But it's either made it huge. So you would really have to use your scale factor. So if I wanted to do it by 2, I would just type in 2. So it's going to be twice as big. But this is actually going to be a good point to, you see, like, if right now it won't let me zoom out anymore. I don't know, you'll probably come across this. Once you start doing it, you'll probably come across it pretty soon, where I can zoom in, but I can't actually bring my whole, I can't zoom out anymore. So what AutoCAD does to save memory is that it will, whatever you're kind of looking at, it kind of puts into memory, and the rest it kind of forgets about. So what it's doing right now is like it's not thinking about anything outside of this anymore, so it won't let me zoom out. But at least on Windows, if I double click, it resets. It kind of does a zoom extends, similar to Rhino, but it will kind of it will re-bring everything back into memory and kind of redraw it and kind of center your image on, recenter your window on your object. So again, if I'm way out here and I'm lost in space because I technically can zoom in forever, and I have no idea where my thing is. If I double click, you'll see it's brought me back to, and it'll kind of let me zoom in and out again. On the actual command that is it zoom? Yeah, if you just type in zoom, it's going to bring that up just by the command. But double click this center button on the mouse. Center button on the mouse. We'll do that. Okay, so basically with those commands, those are the only commands I will really use while kind of creating, even doesn't matter how complex it is, that kind of covers it all. But there's also the distance command up here. So that's if you're going to measure, if you want to measure something. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And then it'll bring it up in the menu down below how long it was. All right, so so other than setting up the file originally with the layers, the other part that gets people is actually printing stuff to scale, and either to the printers or to a PDF for your line work. So let me just get a few different layers in here. Oh, so shortcuts, spacebar does your last command again. And also, if I select something, move it, or do anything to it, if I've had it selected, and then I go to the move command again, or any command, and when it says select objects, if I just press P instead of actually selecting something, it will select my previous one. So if you've selected something super complex, moved it, and then unselected it, and then we're like, oh, damn. You can just press, select or move or rotate or anything. Just press P. It'll do the exact same thing you just did. Sure.
So each line is on its own layer, so the walls are on the walls and on the 3D.
Right.
If you went to 3D perspective, do they show us walls, or
no.
are the layers set up as certain?
No, so it's not like Revit or a program like that where they don't have information associated with them. So they're all lines. So it's
Pretty much for you just to know what is that, what line is that.
yeah, and you'll see when we're printing, because all my walls are on the wall and they're the same color, they're going to be printed at the same line weight, which was pre kind of put in. Right. I've used Revit before, but I'm not really good at it. So we could if you wanted to, but just some people have used Revit for their school projects, and you can not to say that they were bad, because they weren't, but you can tell that they used Revit for their projects, which is usually not a good thing, because you can do obviously complex, forms and shapes in Revit, but it's extremely difficult. It's almost like you can tell usually a building's been done in SketchUp because there's no curves. You can tell that a thing's been done in Revit because all the windows are like a standard generic size. There's no curves, and all the plans that Revit export look exactly the same. So it is helpful. I did use it while working, but very little. So I can see if Brett might know it, or else I don't know. I'll see. But I click yes, and then if I get the job, I spend 2 days trying to learn it. But it's not. The last place I worked had, the way it worked was the designers would all use AutoCAD or SketchUp or Rhino, and you would fully resolve the idea almost, and then so you'd have details and stuff all created in AutoCAD or basically AutoCAD, and then you would give it to the techs, and the techs would put it into Revit, and then actually build the construction drawings from that. So probably even if it says Revit on it, unless you're working as a tech, which you could, you're not. I don't think you'll have to be a pro, because most firms will have a Revit Pro, because it is so is extremely complex. And if AutoCAD was difficult to set up, Revit would take like weeks to set up properly for a firm, just because there's so many like options. But I know we can. I'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
I don't like Revit at all, but that said, I bought a thing for Rhino that's like Revit for Revit Lite, extremely Revit Lite for Rhino, and I use it, so I can't say it's horrible, but let's just say we have a window in here too. Obviously this is, so usually I just would offset that. It's going to be like a meter window. I'm going to select it all and trim, and then I draw my, let's see, my window line. And then also, I didn't say this command, but where is it? Match properties, otherwise known as MA. Especially when you're dealing with the layers you want to keep. Obviously, I want my ends of my walls to be on my wall layer. I could select them and do that, but the easier way would be to I just click something on my wall, and now I have this little paintbrush, and it's just going to be like I painted those wall, and that's the match properties. We're going to make this I think I have a glazing layer. Right. And yeah, so when I go offset, it'll ask me with a 1, or what do I have? Select that, offset. It's going to ask for how long, so I have the last command is always, or the last dimension is always in there, so I'm just going to keep it 1,000. Press enter again, and if I have it below, it shows the line here. If I have it above, it's actually just exactly right there, but it's just where that is.
So just wherever you put your cursor, that's where it's going to go.
Yeah, it will only offset, I guess, perpendicular to the line or parallel to the line. So I can't do it left or right. I would have to just copy it that way. This is going, so yeah, up or down for this line. If I did so if I offset this one here, again 1,000, you'll see that it's either left or right, or left or right to it. Let's delete that. All right. So again, so I always do this. I forget I'm on the right layer or the wrong layer. Again, if I just match properties, click one of my walls, there, it's now a wall. Right, for I might have a door in here. Insert door. I think this is here because my my little door. So I think I had this as a block. You might not have this in here. I can send you blocks later if you'd like. But this is a good one for the scale. So if I click this door, so it came in at I used the same blocks for metric as imperial. So this might be like 24, or it's got the actual dimensions is like 24 something. So it came in at 24 millimeters. So if I want to scale that, specify the base point here, and then I'm going to click reference. So I obviously I want this edge to this edge to fill that space. Again, this door is going to be slightly out of proportion, but right. So now I kind of have this reference line that's tied with my mouse, and I can just click to fill up the space. So that's scale reference. That's probably the most helpful. Well, it's one of the most helpful things. Because if you try to scale that without using that reference line, you're going to be just guessing. So scale, base point, and then you can see that my mouse is not, it would be impossible to do that. So scale, base point, reference the width of the door, and then I'm going to turn that to there. And again, I'm going to turn that and go to my, I have a door layer, that's dimensions, door. Okay, so there's my ugly studio project. And we want to print this on a 11 by 17. So a lot of people try to print from this screen. They'll go File, Print, and what will come up is this, and it's technically doable, but you're going to have to play with all these scale options and fit to paper, which is the hard and difficult way. So down here we have, and hopefully it's similar on a Mac, model, layout, model and 2 layouts. And if I wanted to add more layouts, I can, or delete them just by right-clicking. But what layouts are basically like virtual pages that you can lay out and then easily print. So like on a project that I've been working on, I might have 8.5 by 11 page, A1 page, A1. If I have multiple levels on a building, I'll do them all in the same AutoCAD file, but I'll have level 1 A1, level 2 A1, level 3 A1, and you can set up all those pages one time, and then do multiple versions, or keep on editing your actual drawing, and those pages will automatically update. So with the same layout, you could have the same title bar, you could have the same everything. It's just going to take your model onto that layout that you've set up, and then you can easily print it. So if I just go to one right now, that lined up pretty nicely, but it might not look like that. But what you want to do, right now I have no idea what size this page is, and yours might show white right now, but I changed that in the options. It was the same way I did the other one to black. But if you right click on it and go Page Setup Manager, I could name this, but I'm just going to modify this current one. All right. So this kind of looks like the print screen, but really what you're doing is setting up the page. So usually I won't print directly from this. I usually put it to what do I want? Adobe PDF. And you might need Adobe, you might need Adobe Acrobat installed on your computer for this to show up. But there's also, where to go? Drawing to PDF. So if you don't have the Adobe PDF one, click that. And what that do will just save my file to PDF, and then from there I usually either put it to Illustrator or print it from that. It's going to ask your paper size. So let's say 11 by 17. And you'll see up here, this is just kind of like a image of what your page looks like. You don't need to worry about plot area right now. But in plot scale, this is where a lot of people miss. Sometimes it will say inches to that. Since we're working in millimeters, we want 1 millimeter equals 1 unit. So this layout we're setting up is in virtual, or in real scale, just 11 by 17. So 1 millimeter, 1 unit, 1 to 1. If we're going to print our thing at 1 to 100, we do that elsewhere. This is always 1 to 1. So just keep that in mind. And then let's just press OK for that now. Right. So now we have a page which it should be the right size, and then we have kind of our drawing that's in this square. So this square is basically a viewport of our model space. So I don't know if they, yeah. So this is paper space. That's kind of what they call it. So this is like a view of your piece of paper that's going to be printed. And then this here is your model space. So if you click here, and if you don't see your model in it, that's okay. You'll just have to kind of recenter it. But if you click on it, you can change, right? So if you wanted 2 different drawings on the same page, you could do that. You can lay out your page like that here. But if you double click into it, you now get, like, you're looking through the window into your actual model. And again, if you want to just center it, if you double click, it'll bring it up like that. You'll see though that it's not really, just by zooming in and out, you don't just want to kind of, guess the scale. So if you're in this model space here, you'll see down here in your scale are a bunch of different scales. And right now, I think the default, it loads imperial ones. But if you go to custom, and then you can either add your own scales, or if you just click this reset button and then click metric, it's now changed all the scales to these nice metric scales. Let's just click OK. So if we turn this, let's say 1 to 100. Okay, that's a little big. Okay, doesn't have a 1 to 200, so I'm just going to do a custom one. So click on custom and then click add. Call it 1 to 200. And then obviously 1 to 200 is 1 millimeter, or 1 millimeter on the paper equals 200 millimeters on my actual building. So 1 paper unit equals 200. Now if I select that down here, you'll see that my model fits pretty nicely on the piece of paper. If I wanted to copy that, just copy the actual viewport, and if I had multiple drawings, I could just put another one beside it.
Would you do multiple drawings like in the same file and just like?
Yeah. So on this one here, I have this is a little more final one, so it's relatively clean. But I have all 3 levels, the roof, and I have my sections and my site plan. So everything's in the same file because it's also easy to kind of line them up either vertically or horizontally, and you can either build your sections in that file from just drawing construction lines down from your plans, or also just doing a second floor plan right below your first floor plan, so you can line everything up. So I'll have everything in the same file, and you'll see here I have a bunch of different pages set up. These ones were all on the same page, but the ones with all my details, I had another file with my details in it, and there's a bunch of details scattered around, and then they're all kind of nicely laid out on the same page on the paper. Right. Well, no, it would be like if I had 2 of these that were slightly different. Let's just so I might have drawn them just like that. I mean, this one could be anywhere up here, but on here, I'll usually just like double click into it so I can start changing around. Find it. Okay, I don't know what it's doing there. It starts getting weird. Just do that double mouse click thing, and then it will kind of bring it back. And then again, set my scale to 1 to 200. And just line them up that way. These outlines here will print unless they are on this layer called depth points, which shows up once you start doing dimensions. But just as a little secret, turn it to depth points, those outlines of the thing, and they won't actually print. So you won't have these weird boxes around your drawings. Alright, so you're only going to have to do this next step once, but because we haven't loaded that kind of plot style manager in, I'll show you how to do that. So if you go File, Print, but don't click on Print, it should just have the little arrow beside it to bring up all these options. And if you go to Manage Plot Styles, it's going to bring up this place on your computer that has them all the built-in ones. So mine I already have in here, but what you're going to need to do is take, where is it? The file you downloaded, so evds half, and then just drag it into that. So that's added this preset, pre-built one into your kind of list. And what that will do, you might need actually to save. Yeah, you might need to save and restart it for that to kind of update. But feel free to do that if it's not showing up. But once I go to print, so most of the options that we preset into our actual layout are already here. But in the top right we have plot style table. So here's going to be all those ones from that folder, and here's the one that I'm selecting. And just to show you kind of what it does, because you can go into edit this if you'd like. But what it's saying here is everything in color 1 is going to be 0.003 inches wide. This is really the only one I do. You have to change. Screening is I guess it's transparency, so if you wanted it lighter you could change that. But you see color 1, color 2 are the same, color 3 gets a little heavier, color 5 is 0.008 inch, and down to right, yeah, I guess why is that like that? Oh sorry, color, that's not white, that's gray. So there is a gray. The white one is somewhere else. Sorry, here. As you see, that's the thickest one. So they're set up, they're kind of set up to print all your lines differently. So you could actually set, if you wanted to, you could make 250 different line types, but that's overkill a bit. So that's why it's been set up to only use these first kind of the main colors that are kind of separate in that color selector. So 1 through 7, and then white. So if you did want to print out your walls thicker, you could just come in here and then change this to kind of a thicker line weight. Right, so I've selected my plot style table, my paper's right. This here I usually switch up slightly, so it says what to plot. I usually just go to window, and once you click on window, it's going to just ask you to like draw a square. So I just usually draw a square around my drawings and then center the plot. So now that little square is centered right in the page. It's still 1-to-1 because remember we actually put these have the scale in them, not the overall page. So it's 1-to-1. Adobe PDF. The generic or the default one should work. If I go OK, it's going to ask me where to save it. There. And you can see that it's picked up the line weights from that plot style. These are, if I print this out on 11 by 17 without scaling it while I print it, these are exactly 1 to 200. So and if I wanted to do a little, a detail on this one, or if I wanted to show a little more information, I could, switch that to, let's say 1 to 50. like show that, and now you have a page with kind of the detail plan and then the overall plan. So really, on this page here, you're changing kind of just the view of your page and the scale, the things that are being printed out. Does that printing all make sense? And if I start changing this, and I need to print another version, as long as I still want like these views, you can easily just press print again, and the scale will be the same. It will all look the same, but your model's been updated. So that is the easy way to print. All right, I'll just go over dimensions quickly, because they can be, slightly tricky, but I believe this template has been set up so they work kind of nice. So dimensions will be in annotate, and when you click the dimension, or if you hover over dimension, you're going to see there's linear, aligned, angular, arc length, and a bunch of them. Obviously the most typical one is the linear, so I'm not going to click on that yet. I'm going to go over here to this drop down. So you should see, if you open the template that I gave you, a dim metric. So all these are similar to kind of the page style setup. People have just gone in and changed like how high, how big they want the dimensions on the page, what color they want to be, like the different kind of styles, because there are a bunch of different styles. But I believe if you click on Manage Dimension Styles, and the one that's set up right is dim metric. If you go modify, basically these are all the options for this. And the most important one here is really text height. So no matter what scale our model is in, the text is going to be 2.25 millimeters high, which is, I think, about right. So it doesn't matter if if the building is super small on the page, and the text is still going to be the same height. The text will not change. Right. So if I have that set as dim metric and then dimension it, right. So it's going to ask me, you are creating an annotative object. Set the annotation scale to the scale, blah, blah, blah. So we know we're kind of clicking, or we've been using 1 to 200. So we're just going to set that. And there is a way to change that later, and you'll see that down here, even though we're still drawing in 1 to 1, you can set this to 1 to 200 just because we know that we're printing. That's kind of what we're using. So this dimension, you click the start, click the end, and then pull it out wherever you want. And this, obviously that's 12 meters long. I want to actually put that on my dimension layer. And then then again, if we stretch that out, stretch that wall, you can see it's changing with the new kind of dimensions. So if we go to our print side, what's on this one? Okay, 1 second. There. So when we put this in, we said it was going to show up at 1 to 200. If we have this on something other than 1 to 200, it will not, or shouldn't. Come on. Right. So if we wanted this, 1 to 100, that dimension is not set up to show. So that's actually well, it might seem bad, but usually you would set things up so you would do all your dimensions for your kind of overall drawing, and then if you're going to zoom in somewhere to like a corner on a wall and do a detail of that wall, you wouldn't actually want to redraw that. You could do that right on your drawing, but all those dimensions will be set at a different scale. So when you print your overall one, those little dimensions on that corner won't show. They'll only show up on the view where you've actually zoomed into that right scale. So does that make sense, kind of? I'll show. Okay, so let's pretend our scale is 1 to 50, and let's dimension, this. Right, so I now have this one, I did at 1 to 200. This one, I did at 1 to 50. And you can even see this text here is bigger than this text, because this one knows it's going to go in at 1 to 50. So the text is actually going to have to be bigger or smaller. The text will have to be smaller to be 2 millimeters high on that page. This can kind of get confusing, and this text, obviously, the building's going to be smaller, so to be 2 inches high on this view, it's actually, or 2 millimeters high, it's actually bigger. So if we went back here and set it to 1 to 200, we have our 1 to 200 dimension. And if I set this to 1 to, let's go to this one over here. Set this one to 1 to 50, we have our 1 to 50 dimension. Now you can change that as well if you go back here. And if I click my, let's click this one. If I click it and I right click on it, there will be annotative object scale. If I go add or delete scales, see it's got its 1 to 50, so that's the one we drew it at. But we can also add 1 to 200. Let's click OK. And now you'll see it's showing up in the 1 to 200 and it's showing up in the 1 to 50. But you can see also when this prints, all our dimension texts are going to be at the same height or the same readability. Obviously, you don't want this to be you don't want differing, text height on your page. It should be all the same. So that is that. And then obviously you can do a bunch of stuff with dimensions. If you go dimension, click 1, and then click here, and I'm going to bring that out. But then up here we have continue. Click on continue, and then it's got the next one, the next one, the next one. And now my building is like fully dimensioned. And those will update again if I stretch or shrink my building or scale it or anything like that. So I am. Yeah, I think we're done. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Is there anything particular you want to export to Illustrator?
No, I usually just would export the same whole thing, but when I print, I go to PDF, and then you just open that PDF in Illustrator.
It'll have all the lines and all?
Yep. So then, usually I might spice it up a bit, add some color or change, whatever. No, I mean if you want to start using AutoCAD for Studio or anything, I don't know graphic assignment will use AutoCAD, I think. I'm pretty sure. But I know it's still I've used it a lot since, being at the school, so.